The sound of a locomotive hissed and chugged as it pulled away from Willow Creek Station, leaving behind nothing but a cloud of dust and a lone figure on the wooden platform. Beatrice Nichols clutched her single valise to her chest, her shoulders shaking with each silent sob as she watched her last hope disappear down the tracks. The late afternoon sun of September 1875 cast long shadows across the small Montana town, the golden light doing nothing to warm the chill of abandonment that had settled in her bones. 3 weeks on a train from Boston, following months of correspondence with a man who had promised her a new life, only to find no one waiting for her at the station. The station master had awkwardly informed her that Jasper Holden, her intended, had married another just 2 weeks prior, apparently forgetting he had a bride to be on her way from back east. With nowhere to go, no money for a return ticket, and night approaching in a strange town, Beatrice lowered herself to the edge of the platform. Her blue traveling dress, once crisp and neat, was now wrinkled and stained from the journey. At 22 years old, she had gambled everything on this new beginning, selling what little she owned to afford the trip west after her parents' deaths had left her with mounting debts and few prospects. "Miss, you've been sitting there going on 2 hours now." Beatrice looked up, hastily wiping her tears with a handkerchief that had long since become damp. Standing before her was a tall man with broad shoulders, dusty boots, and kind eyes the color of warm amber. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat. "I'm afraid I have nowhere else to go," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The man crouched down so they were at eye level. "Name's Clayton Yates. I run the Double Y Ranch about 10 miles outside of town." He studied her face for a moment. "You're that mail-order bride, aren't you?" "The one Holden sent for," Beatrice nodded, feeling a fresh wave of humiliation wash over her. "Beatrice Nichols," she managed to say. "And yes, though it seems Mr. Holden has forgotten about our arrangement." Clayton's jaw tightened. "Holden's a fool and worse." He hesitated, then extended his hand to her. "Miss Nichols, I don't mean to be forward, but night's coming and this isn't a place for a lady to be alone. I've got a spare room at my ranch house. You can stay there tonight, figure out your next steps in the morning." Beatrice stared at his outstretched hand. Every lesson in propriety screamed against accepting such an offer from a stranger, but what choice did she have? The alternative was spending the night on this platform or seeking charity from one of the establishments whose raucous noise already spilled into the street as the evening began. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," Clayton said firmly. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Tanner, lives on the property. Your reputation would be safe." After a moment's hesitation, Beatrice placed her gloved hand in his. Clayton helped her to her feet, his touch gentle but strong. "Let's begin again," he said, picking up her valise with one hand while keeping the other at her elbow. "You've come a long way, Miss Nichols, and Willow Creek might not be what you expected, but it's not all bad. Tomorrow things will look brighter." As Clayton led her toward a wagon parked nearby, Beatrice couldn't help but wonder if those words might be true. The future she had planned lay in ruins, but perhaps, just perhaps, something else awaited her in this wild country. The ride to the Double Y Ranch was mostly silent. Beatrice was too exhausted and overwhelmed to make conversation, and Clayton seemed to understand her need for quiet. The landscape rolled by vast expanses of grassland giving way to clusters of pine trees as they moved toward the foothills. The setting sun painted the Montana sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple so vivid that Beatrice momentarily forgot her troubles. "It's beautiful," she whispered, almost to herself. Clayton glanced at her. "Most beautiful place on earth, if you ask me, worth every hardship just to see a sunset like this." As they approached the ranch, Beatrice could make out a substantial log house nestled against a backdrop of hills, with several outbuildings nearby and corrals containing horses. A woman emerged from the house as the wagon pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. "Clayton Yates, you're late for supper again," she called out, her stern expression softening when she spotted Beatrice. "And you've brought company." "Mrs. Tanner, this is Miss Beatrice Nichols," Clayton explained as he helped Beatrice down from the wagon. "She needs a place to stay tonight." "Miss Nichols, this is Mrs. Tanner, the finest housekeeper and cook this side of the Mississippi." Mrs. Tanner was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and kind, knowing eyes. She looked Beatrice up and down, taking in her travel-worn appearance and red-rimmed eyes. "Holden." She asked Clayton quietly. He nodded. Mrs. Tanner clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Well, come inside, dear. You look dead on your feet. A hot meal and a bath will do you worlds of good." The inside of the ranch house was surprisingly refined for a bachelor's home. Polished wooden floors, sturdy furniture, and even a few touches that spoke of Eastern-influence books lined on shelves, a piano in one corner of the main room and framed landscapes on the walls. "My sister visited last year," Clayton explained, noticing Beatrice's surprised expression. "Said I was living like a savage and took matters into her own hands." After the most delicious meal Beatrice had eaten in weeks, roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie, Mrs. Tanner showed her to a small but comfortable bedroom and helped her prepare a bath. "Mr. Yates is a good man," Mrs. Tanner said as she laid out clean towels. "Never known him to turn away someone in need. Lost his parents young, same as you from what he mentioned at supper. Makes a person understand hardship better, I think." Beatrice sank into the warm water once Mrs. Tanner left, letting the heat soothe her aching muscles and tired spirit. Tomorrow she would need to make decisions. Find work somewhere, perhaps. She had trained as a teacher back in Boston, though she had never held a position. Maybe the town had need of one. Morning came with the sounds of a working ranch, distant cattle lowing, horses nickering, men calling to one another as they began their day's work. Beatrice dressed in her second-best dress, a modest green cotton with white trim, and made her way to the kitchen where she found Mrs. Tanner preparing breakfast. "Good morning, dear. Sleep well." "Better than I have in weeks," Beatrice admitted. "Thank you for your kindness." "Nonsense. Now sit and eat." "Clayton's already been out since dawn, but he said to tell you he'd be back mid-morning to take you into town if that's what you decide." Beatrice ate slowly, contemplating her options. Return to town and do what exactly? She had enough money for perhaps a week at the hotel if it wasn't too expensive. After that, her thoughts were interrupted by Clayton's return. He entered the kitchen, his face flushed from exertion but smiling when he saw her. "Miss Nichols, I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you." "Your home is lovely." Clayton poured himself coffee and sat across from her. "I spoke with Sheriff Williams this morning. Turns out the schoolteacher in Willow Creek just eloped with a cattle buyer passing through town, left the school board in quite a predicament with the fall term about to start." "I mentioned you might be looking for employment." Beatrice's heart leapt. I was trained as a teacher, though I've never had my own classroom." "Well, if you're interested, the school board is meeting this afternoon. I told the sheriff I'd bring you by if you wanted to speak with them." For the first time since arriving in Montana, Beatrice felt a glimmer of hope. "That would be wonderful, thank you." "There's just one catch," Clayton said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "The schoolteacher's cottage is being repaired after a tree fell on it during a storm last month. Won't be ready for at least a few weeks." "Oh," Beatrice's hopes dimmed. "The thing is," Clayton continued, "I've got more room in this house than I need, and Mrs. Tanner has been saying she could use some company. If you're agreeable, you could stay here until the cottage is ready. In exchange, maybe you could help Mrs. Tanner with some of the household accounts. She's been after me to organize my books for months." Mrs. Tanner snorted. "Years, more like." Beatrice hesitated. The arrangement made practical sense, but she hardly knew these people. Yet something about Clayton Yates inspired trust, and Mrs. Tanner's presence made the situation proper enough. "That's very kind. If I get the position, I accept your offer." The school board meeting went better than Beatrice could have hoped. The 5 members, the town doctor, The banker, the general store owner, a local rancher, and the minister's wife were desperate enough for a teacher that they barely glanced at her credentials before offering her the position. "Term starts in 2 weeks," Dr. Evans, the board president, informed her. 28 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. The salary is $40 a month, plus the cottage once it's repaired. It wasn't much, but it was more than Beatrice had dared hope for just a day ago. As she and Clayton rode back to the ranch, she could hardly contain her excitement. "I can't thank you enough," she said. "Yesterday I thought all was lost, and today I have a position and a place to stay," Clayton smiled. "Sometimes life works out that way. One door closes, another opens." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur as Beatrice prepared for the school term. Clayton took her to town to purchase necessary supplies, and she spent evenings organizing lesson plans. During the day, when not helping Mrs. Tanner, she explored the ranch, finding peaceful spots to read or simply enjoy the breathtaking landscape. She also began to learn more about Clayton Yates. He had come west at 17, worked as a ranch hand for years before saving enough to buy his own small spread, which he had slowly expanded through hard work and determination. Now, at 30, he was respected throughout the region as a fair employer and skilled rancher. What impressed Beatrice most was Clayton's kindness not just to her, but to everyone around him. He treated his ranch hands with respect, helped neighbors when needed, and had a particular soft spot for the town's orphans, often bringing them out to the ranch to learn riding and roping. "My parents died when I was 14, he explained one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "If not for neighbors who took me in, I might have ended up in an orphanage myself." Beatrice found herself sharing her own story, in return her father's illness that drained their savings, her mother's death shortly after from heartbreak as much as influenza, and the desperate circumstances that had led her to become a mail-order bride. "I never thought I'd marry a stranger," she admitted. "But the advertisement seemed promising. Mr. Holden wrote such beautiful letters." Clayton's jaw tightened. Holden has a way with words, not so much with honesty. The first day of school arrived, and Beatrice found herself standing before 28 curious faces in the small schoolhouse on the edge of town. Despite her nerves, the day went well, and she returned to the ranch that evening tired but satisfied. "How was it?" Clayton asked as they sat down to supper. "Wonderful and terrifying all at once," Beatrice laughed. "The children are eager to learn, though some of the older boys may need firm handling." "You'll manage them," Clayton said with confidence. "I've seen how you handled that ornery mare that no one could get near. You've got a gentle touch but a firm hand when needed." Beatrice blushed at the compliment. Over the past 2 weeks, she had found herself increasingly drawn to Clayton. His quiet strength, his integrity, his occasional flashes of dry humor all combined to make him unlike any man she had known in Boston. As September turned to October, Beatrice settled into a routine. Weekdays teaching, evenings grading papers or reading by the fire, and weekends helping around the ranch or accompanying Clayton on rides across his property. The cottage in town remained under repair, plagued by delays when the carpenter broke his arm, but Beatrice found she was in no hurry to leave the Double Y. On a crisp Saturday morning, Clayton suggested a picnic. "There's a spot by the creek I'd like to show you. The aspens are turning gold, prettiest sight you'll ever see." They rode out together, Beatrice now comfortable on horseback thanks to Clayton's patient teaching. The spot he had chosen was indeed beautiful, a small meadow beside a bubbling creek, surrounded by aspen trees whose leaves shimmered like gold coins in the October sunlight. As they spread the blanket, Mrs. Tanner had packed along with a basket of food. Beatrice noticed Clayton seemed unusually quiet. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Clayton shook his head. "No, nothing wrong, just thinking." They ate in companionable silence for a while before Clayton finally spoke again. "Sheriff Williams mentioned yesterday that the carpenter should finish the cottage by next weekend." "Oh, Beatrice felt an unexpected pang at the news. "That's good, is it?" Clayton looked at her intently. "Beatrice, these past weeks having you at the ranch, it's been something special, Mrs. Tanner says the place feels like a proper home now." Beatrice's heart quickened. "I've been happy there too." Clayton moved closer, taking her hand in his. "I know this isn't the life you planned. You came west expecting to be a wife, not a schoolteacher living on a stranger's ranch." "You're hardly a stranger anymore," Beatrice said softly. "No, I suppose not." He smiled, then grew serious again. "The thing is, I never thought much about marriage. The ranch kept me too busy for courting, and the kind of women I'd want to spend my life with don't usually find their way out here." Beatrice held her breath, afraid to hope. "But then there you were, crying at that platform, and something just—" Clayton struggled for words. "Something just clicked inside me, like I was meant to be there at that moment, to find you." "Clayton, I'm not asking for promises," he hurried on. "It's too soon for that. All I'm asking is that you consider staying at the ranch, even after the cottage is ready. Give us time to see if what I'm feeling, what I hope you might be feeling too, could grow into something more." Beatrice looked into his earnest face and realized with sudden clarity that she had begun falling in love with Clayton Yates almost from the moment he had extended his hand to her on that platform. "I would like that very much," she whispered. Clayton's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, then gently pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, brief, and full of promise. When they returned to the ranch that afternoon, something had shifted between them. Nothing was said to Mrs. Tanner, but the older woman's knowing smile suggested she had been expecting this development all along. The following weeks brought challenges along with joy. Jasper Holden, drunk and belligerent, confronted Beatrice after school one day, accusing her of trying to embarrass him by staying in town. Clayton arrived just in time, his mere presence enough to send Holden slinking away with muttered threats. "He won't bother you again," Clayton promised, his normally gentle eyes hard as flint as he watched Holden stumble down the street. "How did you know to come?" Beatrice asked as they rode home. "One of your students, Tommy Wilson, saw Holden hanging around and rode out to the ranch. Smart boy." In November, influenza swept through Willow Creek. The school closed temporarily as families focused on caring for their sick. Beatrice insisted on helping Dr. Evans, moving from home to tend to ailing children and their parents. Clayton worried but supported her decision, making sure she ate properly and rested when she could. When Tommy Wilson's mother died, leaving him and his two younger sisters orphaned, Clayton and Beatrice exchanged a look of perfect understanding. Before the day was out, the three Wilson children were settled at the Double Y Ranch, their few belongings moved into the spare rooms. "It's only temporary," Clayton told the hollow-eyed 12-year-old boy. "Just until your uncle and Helena can be contacted." But as days passed with no response from the children's uncle, the temporary arrangement began to feel more permanent. 8-year-old Sarah and 6-year-old Emily blossomed under Mrs. Tanner's and Beatrice's care, while Tommy gradually lost his wary look as Clayton patiently taught him ranch skills. "We're going to need a bigger house," Clayton remarked one evening in December as they watched the children decorate a small Christmas tree he had brought in. Beatrice looked at him questioningly. "If we're going to have a family," he clarified, "these three and perhaps more of our own someday." "Clayton Yates, is that a proposal?" Beatrice asked, her heart racing. Clayton took her hand. "Not a very good one, I suppose. Let me try again." He dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Beatrice Nichols, I know you came west expecting one life and found something entirely different. But I thank God every day that Jasper Holden was fool enough to let you go, because it brought you to me. I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears of happiness filled Beatrice's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." They were married on Christmas Eve in the town church, with Mrs. Tanner beaming from the front pew and the Wilson children serving as attendants. The entire town turned out. everyone having witnessed the blossoming relationship between the respected rancher and the schoolteacher who had arrived so inauspiciously just months before. Spring of 1876 brought many changes to the Double Y Ranch. Construction began on an addition to the house, providing ample room for their growing family. A letter finally arrived from the Wilson children's uncle, explaining he had been prospecting in remote mountains and only just received word of his sister's death. His circumstances, he wrote, made it impossible for him to take the children, but he formally granted guardianship to Clayton and Beatrice, who had already begun adoption proceedings. On a warm May evening, as they sat on the porch swing watching Tommy teach the girls to throw a lasso, Clayton pulled Beatrice close. "Are you happy?" he asked. "This isn't the life you thought you'd have when you boarded that train in Boston." Beatrice laid her head on his shoulder, her hand resting on the slight swell of her stomach where their first biological child grew alongside the three who had already claimed their hearts. "It's better," she said simply. "So much better than anything I could have imagined." Clayton kissed the top of her head. "I still remember you sitting there at the platform edge, looking so lost. Something told me right then that you belonged here, not just in Willow Creek, but here with me." "You were right," Beatrice murmured. "I just needed someone to help me begin again." As twilight deepened into night, with the sound of children's laughter filling the air and the warmth of her husband beside her, Beatrice Nichols Yates couldn't help but marvel at how life's greatest disappointments sometimes led to its greatest joys. She had traveled west seeking security, and found love instead, a love born from kindness offered to a stranger crying at a train platform. A love that had built a family and a future brighter than she had ever dared to dream. Years would pass, the Double Y Ranch would prosper, more children would join their family through birth and circumstance, and Willow Creek would grow from a small frontier town into a thriving community. Through it all, Clayton and Beatrice would remain at the heart of it, their love story becoming something of a legend in the region, how the abandoned mail-order bride and the kind-hearted cowboy had found in each other exactly what neither knew they were looking for. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and they had the porch to themselves, Clayton would take Beatrice's hand, kiss it gently, and whisper, "Let's begin again," reminding them both of that fateful day when two strangers' paths crossed at a train platform and changed the course of their lives forever.